You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery, to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your podcast host for today. Hey, what's going on everyone? Welcome to episode 123 of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. For this episode, we will be continuing with the SAA and COSA Speaker meeting. This week will feature Allison W from San Francisco speaking for COSA. So for anyone new to SAA or to the podcast, COSA is a 12-step recovery program for those whose lives have been affected by compulsive sexual behavior. Many have come to COSA not only because of a partner's sexual addiction, but also by other sexual trauma and generational influence. This would also include sexual anorexia, intimacy avoidance, and adult children of sexual addiction. In Allison's share, she talked about being a child of sex addicts, as well as being an intimacy avoidant and sexual anorexic. And for the reading this week, I picked out a few paragraphs from the SAA pamphlet, Intimacy Avoidance, Another Aspect of Sex Addiction. And the paragraphs that I'm going to be reading come from the section called Our Journey Begins, and I will be bouncing around a little bit, starting out with a quote from Sex Addicts Anonymous on page 72. This is actually further down in the reading, but I wanted to read this first, and then I'll go back to the beginning. In the same way that compulsive starving of oneself, or anorexia, is considered an eating disorder, avoidance of sex can be seen as an addictive sexual behavior. Some of us have found ourselves shut down sexually in recovery, afraid of sex because of its association in our minds with our addiction or with past sexual trauma, or because of a fear of intimacy and vulnerability. Trying to control our sexuality in this way is just another symptom of our disease. The solution lies in turning our will and our lives over to the care of our higher power, knowing that however unfamiliar we are with the challenges of healthier sexuality, we can put our trust in the God of our understanding. And again, that was from the Green Book on page 72. And jumping back to the beginning of Our Journey Begins. Although acting in appeared to highlight more of what was absent in our lives than what was present, in sharing our first step stories with one another, we gradually become aware of a range of subtle but overt behaviors that enabled us to avoid authentic closeness or intimacy. We may have created a fog of chaos, drama, and arguments, or used work as a barrier to intimacy and to obscure reality. In order to avoid emotional closeness, some of us chose anonymous partners, used drugs or alcohol, or hid under the cover of darkness. To deflect sexual attention, we may have dressed in dirty, baggy, or unflattering clothes, protected ourselves by excessive weight gain, or foregone basic hygiene and self-care. For some of us, voyeurism or peeping was a way to keep a wall of secrecy, distance, or glass between ourselves and those to whom we were attracted. The glass of the computer screen could be seen as just a new or more sophisticated window that provided a similar barrier between others and being known by them. And I'm going to skip down a little bit. Many of us knew intuitively that we had a tendency to become emotionally dependent on others and could not risk losing ourselves in the needs or demands of a close relationship. Others stayed in loveless relationships with partners of one gender to disguise a more authentic attraction to members of the other, or because we feared being alone. Some of us were obsessed with romantic or sexual fantasy and intrigue, often having more relationships in our mind than in actual fact. Some reported feeling ashamed of how few people we had been with, and yet felt powerless to initiate even the simplest overtures because of sexual anxiety or awkwardness. Many of us could not bring ourselves to trust a partner, believing that we would be hurt or abandoned if we allowed ourselves to become vulnerable. Some cultivated a blissful ignorance of others' romantic or sexual interest in us, while many more were all too anxiously aware and often threatened, engulfed, or smothered by personal attention or flirting. And so I'm going to end there. There's a lot of great information in this pamphlet. When I first came across this pamphlet, I believe it was called Compulsive Sexual Avoidance, and was really eye-opening for me and the ways that I have been an intimacy avoidant. So a lot of that gives some background into Allison's story, and it's really interesting here on the podcast. We've done episode 20 on intimacy avoidance and sexual anorexia, but most of the other shares around sexual anorexia and intimacy avoidance have been from COSA speakers, and I am truly grateful to share their stories here. So with that, I am now ready to turn it over to Allison W. at the Bay Area's Quarterly SAA and COSA speaker meeting. And again, this was from the beginning of February, where it was super stormy, and there's a little bit of a reference in Allison's share about the storm. So here it is. I hope you enjoy it.
Hi, I'm Allison. I am a COSA and an ACSA. I'm a fantasy addict and a sexual anorexic. And thank you very much, Cindy. No pressure at all to be a fulfill the spirit animal mission. I just want to name for myself. I do not speak for COSA. I don't speak for any of the programs I'm in. I'm just another bozo on the bus. I'm just going to try to talk about what it was like, what happened, what it's like, and what I got a program for today. I come from a family of addicts that do and don't really get treatment and get help. My first program, I joined a food program a little over 16 years ago, and I was able to get help with it. And then I learned from that recovery, I needed more programs. So I joke, I collect programs like merit badges, but I think it's amazing because you can put program to all of these aspects of your life, and the 12 steps and your higher power can help along with other outside therapy and other things that are available. But for me, program has saved my life. I've been able to be a person in the world, a good partner, a good daughter, a good friend, because I have worked the steps and continue to work the steps and continue to show up. And I go to meetings. I go to 3 of my food program meetings a week. I do 2 COSA meetings and a step study. I go to a partner meeting. I work this program because it is medicine I need for me to be a person in the world. Other people might not need this. I need this. My brain doesn't tell me how to be. And I was raised my dad had food problems. My mom had her own workaholism. My brother had undiagnosed Asperger's. And I want to say we're related to him. I found my brother's Playboys. He was 13 and my dad gave them to him in boxes. And I was like, I need to find them. And I was a precocious younger sister who was like 8 or 9. And I did find them and I read through them and I found them interesting. And as I got older, my brother would buy porn. My dad would use it. I would take it. My mom would watch the Cinemax, HBO After Hours. And our whole family wouldn't talk about this. So there was this energy of sexuality where it wasn't discussed. My dad was 350 pounds. We never talked about him being a big man and eating. So there was all of this, let's not talk to the bear in the room because the bear will attack. Safety wise, I had to not know what I know. So one of my coping mechanisms very much is fantasy, because I need to not be in reality because reality is too scary. And then I also learned I could eat extra food. And then I also learned I could check out, and there are options of checking out. So around 11, my mom got breast cancer. My grandfather was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and told he had 6 months to live. And I gained 40 pounds. And I also kind of checked out a little bit. I would finish my homework and I'd watch hours and hours of TV after school because both my parents were working. I would look at my brother's magazines, and I kind of learned this world of other people being scary. And I'm not sure if it was the times, but a lot of movies would always be some attractive woman and then she would get violated. So I was always really afraid of rape. So it was the idea of wanting something, but then also don't get too close. So my anorexia kind of came in of wanting this closeness, but anyone actually getting too close to me felt really scary. So I put on weight to not have any male attention. And part of this is my parents, there was covert incest from both of them. My mom kind of made me her partner, and there was like a little bit of inappropriate touching or boundary breaking where she would be intimate with my dad and then get into bed with me after. My dad would talk to me like I was his partner, like we'd go on little dates, and he would share about like, if you were ever with a prostitute, you don't kiss them, like kind of really sharing things of like, I think it's time for you to go have sex, like things that were not like, now I can see them. Now I can say like, there's a line and you just crossed it. But at that age, my dad was my hero. And like, this is what I knew. So I was that girl in high school who would say inappropriate things. And part of it was, if I said this boundary thing and you were still okay with it, then maybe you could handle me. But if this was too much for you, then real fully me would be something that you couldn't handle. And part of it was, I think I had difficulty being with myself. I had to kind of push others away or be too much because I was always afraid of being forgotten. I was constantly forgotten at school by my dad, like so much so, 45 minutes, an hour late, that I would call him and he'd wake up from his nap, he'd put on pants and then come and, get me. Like, I just never believed I was worth remembering, that I had value. So I had to really work hard to be so interesting or so valuable at any of these things because I wasn't okay as I was. And my family, we couldn't just sit with hard feelings. Like, even now, I'll talk to my mom and she kind of wants to solve. And we read this amazing thing that when someone's talking to you, you can ask, do you want a hug? Do you want to be helped? Or do you just want to be heard? Which is just really helpful of like, what is it you're looking for so that neither one of us are going to solve when it's like, I just want to be heard, just want to say it out loud. And there was just so much of either helping or kind of ignoring. Like if you said something, someone else would win out. You'd have to have the best interesting story. So at age of 12, bulimia, and then I knew I had a problem. And then at 16, my dad took my mom and me to a food program for us to sit in a room. And it was my first 12-step meeting. And it was a little too much. Like I just couldn't take it in. But I knew I had a problem. And then just going to briefly talk about, so I hadn't ever really been with them. I kissed boys at camp. That was kind of, I was always a good camp girl, but never like in high school. I wanted to date with the guy I liked and we'd have lunch every day. We were the only ones in the movie theater. And I ran away. Like once the car went to our house, I was like, I don't want him to get close to me. Like I was really afraid of anyone kind of getting to know me. So my first partner was my married boss when I was 22, because my dad passed away when I was 22. I graduated college. My dad was in the ICU for a year. My mom didn't want to believe that my dad wouldn't die. So this denial again of like fantasy I kind of inherited was like, there's no way he could die. It's not possible. It shouldn't happen. When the doctor said anyone his size, he won't last a year. And my dad lasted 11 months. But like once that happened, I was a little afraid of being in the world. I knew I couldn't be in the house with my mom because if I was with her, I would take care of her and not myself. So I took a job selling cars, and my boss was 4 years older, and he kept making comments to me and was inappropriate. And I was afraid if I didn't do something with him, he wouldn't help me sell cars. He wouldn't help me close the deal. So I kind of went into this cycle of bulimia and servicing him. And it was never me really being happy or satisfied, but it was like a hit. It was never a good hit. And I was always chasing something. So my food disease and my fantasy disease and my apparently being attracted to addicts has just been around for a very long time because that's kind of what was coded in for me. So I did that for a year and a half. I did an outpatient program. And my therapist had suggested 12 steps. I knew I couldn't be near this man. So I did a geographic from North Carolina to San Francisco, and I moved about 16, 17 years ago. And I still kept in touch with him, which was not great. But I also moved into a new apartment. I said, I'm never going to throw up in this toilet. It lasted 6 days. And there was a 12-step meeting 6 blocks away. I walked to the meeting. I sat down. I cried. And I just kept coming back. And I heard that it was possible to get relief, which was great. And then I kind of, anytime I'd get recovery, either my mom would visit or I would talk to this guy, and I would lose my food recovery in sync with these other behaviors. So one of the program people that was in the room suggested another sex program, SLAA. And I went to the meeting. The first one I was at, I was like, ooh, the secretary is really cute. And I was like, maybe this isn't the meeting for me. But I went to 2 other meetings. I went to 3 total. At the 3rd meeting, my boss had texted me and I'd ignored those texts. He left me a voicemail. And I told the person when we were going to do the closing prayer, I told the person next to me, which I don't know where this came from, because why would I want to give up this thing that I'm holding on to? But I had the willingness to say, hey, my qualifier just called me and left a voicemail. And she said, why don't you delete it? In that moment, I had willingness. And that was the first day of my food recovery and me being willing to say goodbye to that man and like what he represented of me giving myself away and treating myself like crap. Because after that, there was another guy at the dealership who wanted me to park down the street because he didn't want to be seen with me. And there was like a roommate. It was me never really putting myself in places where I was safe and I was taken care of. And I was with someone who actually wanted to show up for me. So I realized I had a problem with relationships and with partners. So I spent 2 years not dating. And I wanted to dabble with a guy with fantasy. Then I was doing like kind of sober dating. I would call into my sponsor what step I was on, like what base I was wanting to go to, because I had just lost 40 pounds and I was skinny. I'd been a size 16 and I kind of dropped to like a 6'8". And I was like, okay, so second base. Or I realized if a guy came in, I couldn't say no. It was almost like food. Once I opened that bag of cookies, I eat the whole thing. If a guy was inside, it was going to happen. So I was like, if he doesn't come inside, at least there's a boundary. So I was trying to learn like what works for me. And I would try to slowly like just go on dates. And do I like this guy? I would always want to impress him, but like, do I actually like him? I kind of had some dating and a couple more coworkers. And then I met this guy who was very sweet. He was Jewish. He was nice. He had lost his mother and was close, but there was no chemistry. And I was like, okay, I'm just showing up. And like, it would basically be one date at a time. And I gave myself this goal of if I do 100 dates, eventually I'll find the guy. It was less than 100. And then on a dating website, I met this guy who was super nice. And we like messaged and we met up for coffee. I didn't even think it was anything. And I didn't even tell him my name. I don't remember names very well. So I was like, I'm not gonna tell you yours, or tell me mine. And we went on a date and I went to go to a friend's wedding that weekend. And we spent the whole weekend emailing. And it was like hundreds of emails. And by the time we actually met in person, it felt like date 5 because we've known each other so long. It kind of synced up like a fantasy addict and a sex addict really kind of helped, fulfill the cycle there, which was great. And it was wonderful until it wasn't. And I didn't want to know what I needed. I didn't want to see that there were things there. And I'd been primed from childhood not to look. So I joined a partner program very early on. And then during COVID, things kind of so in 2015, after like 2 years of being together, law enforcement visit Gabriel, not for him, but for information. And I was like, so why did they do that? Like, what was going on? And there was something that happened. And I told my food sponsor, who was always wonderful. She kind of took no crap and was always calling in my BS. And that was amazing because I didn't really get recovery until I put the guys down, did my 4-step, had willingness to be like, what are the things and what is my part? What is me? Where am I selfish? Where am I self-seeking? Where am I dishonest? Where am I, like, if I can break down those major categories, what is it I need my higher power to help me with? Because I can't do it. And my sponsor was like, so where did that come from? What was going on? And I wasn't ready yet to let that go. And Gabriel was crying and he's like, I have a problem, but like not really 100%. And I wanted to believe it wasn't a problem. And they got married a year later. And then during COVID, kind of fast forward to COVID, he hurt his back and I could feel I was pulling away. And I could feel myself wanting to escape because I feel like he wasn't here. And I fell into a movie and book fantasy thing where I watched a movie and then I read the books. And I would spend 6 to 8 to 10 hours. I would tell my food sponsor how much time I spent on this content. But I spent a whole month from Thanksgiving to December on this content because I was so afraid. I was working in retail and I just left that retail job. And I was like, oh, we're getting older. That means we have to have kids. I'm not ready yet to have kids myself. And not with him. And I couldn't be honest with myself about that. So I fell into this fantasy thing. And after a month of doing it, my sponsor said, I can't help you unless you work on this. So I joined an S program a little over 2 years ago. And then I found a sponsor and I had willingness to work the steps. And when I was doing step 4, my sponsor says, like, why don't you ask Gabriel what he's into? And there was a little crack in the door where Gabriel told me, here's a problem I have. And I told him, like, here's what I know, which is 12 steps. Go find a meeting. Like, I don't want to walk away from this relationship, but you need to do the work on this. And there's a weird boundary thing of being a COSA, like not telling someone what to do, but I want to offer experience, strength, and hope. So like, here's what I would do if it was me, or these are things that work. Like, go find a meeting, go get a sponsor. Like, here are meetings you can go to. And my partner started working the program, which is great. And then I realized I had to join a program too, because where am I in this? Like, where is my recovery versus me trying to make a partner work a program that he needs to do for himself? Where is it my stuff and my family dynamics that are really old? I don't want to look at. I don't want to think of my father in a different way. I don't want to think of my mother as being not present and not aware. And I'm just remembering, it's like a year or two ago, I was going through photos with my mom, and she's like, "Oh yeah, here's the neighborhood girl. She actually touched you inappropriately when you were a baby." Like, there's all of this stuff that, like, when you shake the tree, no one wants to think about. And I always knew something was a little off, but it was like, I hadn't been raped. Nothing really bad happened. So like, why am I with this? Why do I feel this way? Why do I need to do this work? But I have to if I want to heal. And in our work together and my COSA work, I was like, I don't know if I want to be in this marriage, but if I don't work on this for myself, I am bound to go out there and find another SA. I'm going to find another person who has these same problems unless I heal the part of me that needs the work. You know, where am I powerless over these people who didn't take care of me in my childhood or weren't able to be honest? And can I try to love them and know that it wasn't their fault? And they did the best they could, but that doesn't mean I can't still feel the pain and the hurt of being dropped as a child and now as an adult and having all of this pain that my partner lied to me. But he had a problem for 20 years. He didn't want to fix it. I can't tell your story here, but like, why would someone give it up if they didn't have to? So it's really hard to wanna show up and to be in this, you know. And for me as a COSA to realize this house I moved into, our metaphoric house, has a super secret basement, you know, and it's got some crap in there that like I didn't realize was there. And I get choices where I get to decide, do I want to do this or not? And in the last 2 years, I stayed at a friend's house right away, and then I had him stay at his brother's house for a little while so that we had time away. And then we came up with boundaries of like, if this thing is crossed, this is a deal breaker for me. This doesn't work. Or if this thing happens, I need to know within 2 to 3 days if some boundary is broken. There needs to be a timeliness on her for me to feel safe. I don't want to have to go through your computer. Also, I'm not going to really be able to. I'm not savvy enough tech wise, but like, you know, I want to know I am okay. That if it's not safe, I should go because I need to take care of myself. I don't want lost time. And in this, I was 38. I'm now 40. I went through 3 rounds of egg freezing because I knew I think I want to have a child. I didn't want to lose that option. It was really painful and challenging, and I didn't get many eggs, but I showed up. And like, I used my program of like, higher power will take care of this. Like, okay, what is the next right action? All right, I'll go to these appointments. I'll get these shots, turn over the results, and then, you know, have willingness. And then one of the rounds, we were thinking of making embryos. And I had a body reaction where I was like, I don't want it. I don't want to make embryos. Like, I don't want to. I was like, okay, like, can I just listen to what my body is telling me, which this doesn't feel safe. This doesn't feel okay. And we didn't. And I did eggs. And then a couple months ago, it felt different. It felt okay. We tried in September, and Gabriel had to sleep with his sobriety, which was really scary. And we did some more work. And then in November, we tried again. And we actually got pregnant, which was kind of amazing because it was like, oh crap, this thing happened. Unfortunately, the fetus did not, you know, grow past a certain point. And about 3 weeks ago, I had a miscarriage and a DNC. And, you know, what's amazing is that I can show up for whatever is in front of me. The promises really do come true. It's specifically the night stuff, which is like when you make amends, like you'll be taken care of, but they're very general. But like, if I do this work, I will not be dropped. It will not be easy. It will not be, I joke that I want program and sobriety and abstinence to be like cupcakes and orgasms, because for me, those are the 2 things I think I really like, but that's not what it is. It's hard stuff that you can get through. And I said the 3rd step when the procedure was happening, and I asked for like I wanted to talk to the little jar thing and say thank you. We nicknamed it mini marshmallow. We also were calling it the tiny dictator because my body was so out of whack. And it's like, let's find a cuter name. But I talked to little marshmallow and said, like, thank you. Thank you for knowing that it's possible to conceive naturally because I'm older. Thank you for giving us hope and for giving me a taste of what this is like. And I also said, like, thank you for all the things that I don't even know I've learned yet from this process. Because anything that happens, I think higher power wants me to learn this and to go through this for some reason. It's not always to do it just for something bad to happen. There must be someone else that needs to hear it's possible to get through it. Because all of these things, I'm not picking up my content. I'm not acting out. I'm not reaching out to old boyfriends or trying to get hits in some way. I'm not eating the food. I'm not throwing up, which means it's possible to get through really hard things and not use. Because I needed to hear that it was possible. I needed to hear that someone could not eat cake at their wedding. I needed to hear it was possible to be pregnant, to be okay, or to go through miscarriages in a COSA SAA relationship and not lose the relationship. Because we had a whole year where we weren't intimate. Like, we took the time because I wanted to check in, like, is this right? Am I doing it because it's right for me, not because some calendar says I'm supposed to? I'm really big on, like, what should I do? What are the top jeans I should wear? Like, what should my job be? How much money should I have? I want someone outside of me to tell me what to do. The program is all about checking in with the sponsor, with the higher power, with fellows. Like, anyone have experience with hope? How would you navigate this? Like, show me what it is I'm supposed to learn from this. Because sometimes it's just really hard. And it's not always glamorous and exciting. And like, having this problem, I'm just going to speak for myself. This is not a problem I wanted to have. This is not a cool, sexy problem. Alcoholics and cokeheads are like, oh, yay, people like that. It's in movies. It's fun. I didn't want to have a food problem, but I like being skinny. I like not throwing out my food. I didn't want to have a partner who has a problem. I didn't want to have my own problem. I don't want to have to like think about these things and want to escape because reality is too hard. Because it's hard to talk to people who are not in the rooms about this. There's so much shame and there's so much just not getting it. We're rewatching Sex and the City, and Gabriel and I were talking about it last night. I'm like, all of the characters either have sex addiction or fantasy addiction. They're all in the story of like what it should be here. This guy will come true or this thing will happen. It's so not reality. And just all of this outside content tells us what it should be like versus the reality of it's never going to be that. And I have this amazing sponsor who reminds me, sometimes sex is super smelly and noisy and not glamorous. And it's not like the movies. It's not amazing editing. And like just us being people in the world, we're going to have things that happen. But it's so hard for me to accept it because my childhood felt so not okay. I needed there to be some perfect future where it was going to get better. And I keep wanting to chase, like, in the future, when I make more money, when I have a different job, when we look different, when we're whatever, it's going to be okay. Right now is what it needs to be. Right now is the only moment we have. It's rainy and stormy outside, and it's not sunny. But that doesn't mean the sun's not going to come out. And it's okay. And I'm just going to check in. The opposite of denial for me is honesty. Like, I need to be honest about whatever it is I'm dealing with. And it's really not glamorous, but it's just doing the hard work is what I have to do. I have to just speak truth to, like, how many meetings am I going? Am I working a step? Am I doing my writing? Am I meditating? If I'm feeling anxious, which I think all of you can kind of feel, and pretty tightly wound, and I can talk really fast, when can I slow down? What is going on inside and what do I need? And can I invite higher power to show me the way? Because I haven't been dropped. I moved a bunch of times in a year. I got married. I just started this new job 2 months ago. The week after I was pregnant, I started this new job. And I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, okay, higher power, show me what to do. And I found out Wednesday that basically everyone on the account is getting fired except for me, my people, and like 5 other people. It's going to be really rocky. It's going to be really crappy for everyone else. And also for me, not having them around and not knowing what it's going to be like. But I go to my programisms, which is I act as if someone was really good at this, what would they do? Okay, they would communicate. They'd send an email. They'd ask questions, they'd check in. And that's what I did. I just basically like phone a friend in my head of like, what's the next right action? And then I do it. And I try to turn over this expectation that I'm going to be perfect, because I'm never going to be perfect. Like, it's just not possible. And I'm just shooting on myself when I do that. So can I let myself be human? Because when people are human and vulnerable with me, I get so much out of it. I love it and appreciate it. So how can I show up and just be the person? How can I be Cindy's spirit animal? Not that there's a lot of pressure to be someone's spirit animal, but it's like, how do I just show up for like, what is the truth? What is the hard, uncomfortable thing I don't want to know? I don't want to look at. I can't even tell you, like, I've been with my therapist for 15 years. As soon as I got 6 months of food sobriety, I got a therapist. And every time she talked about my dad, I'd like want to talk around. I didn't want to know this. I didn't want to do this work. And I'm not sure if once I put this down, like I'm working on it, is there something else? There might be other stuff, but like, hopefully there's a program for it. If not, I can try to make a program. Like, what is it that needs to happen for me to get the higher power ism? It doesn't have to just be higher power. It can be whatever the energy in the universe is that's not me. And I've heard it described that higher power is like electricity. It's in the outlet, it's right there. But if I don't plug into it, I don't get it. I've also heard that higher power is like, winning the lotto. Higher power wants me to win, but I have to buy the ticket. I have to spend the $2 to like get the ticket and to hope for the best and like just turn over the results, that it will be whatever it's supposed to be. And Gabriel just said this, just going to talk about what it's like now, is during when we learned that the embryo, the fetus did not like spark, it stopped at 6 weeks, even though my body kept trying to make space for it. Gabriel was really funny. He's like, you're so stubborn. Your body's still trying to make this work. And then he said, like, this is just the first pancake. And I love the first pancake idea. It's like, the first one doesn't always come out right, but the second one, the third one, like, just having willingness just to try. And the other slogan we love is, everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. Because it's just, I don't have to decide. When I married him, I kept saying in my program was like, I'm married one day at a time. If next week, if next month, if next year, I'm not happy, he's not happy, we can reevaluate this. We're not trapped. I want to support this person I love, who's my friend. And an amazing way for me to do that is for me to show up and see on my side of the street. I'm not complaining, not explain, not micromanage his program, not say what meetings have you gone to. That doesn't mean I can't communicate. This isn't working for me, or I need something else, or I'm worried about something. But like, where is it on my side of the street? So I'm not kind of needing him to be my therapist or be that person. It doesn't mean I can't share, but like, I can't make him do something he doesn't want to do. I know enough from my own program. No one could force me to do the work until I could do it for myself. The best thing I can do is lead by myself and just be a support and be a guide. Because I still can't believe I've been doing this for 16 years. I came in at 24. I'm 40. Like, the majority of my, not the majority, okay, in a few years, the majority of my life. But like, I came at a time where my brain was open to it. And I really believe that program can change. It can change how your brain thinks. It can change the patterns. Like, it can help so much. It can bring so much relief. And it's so possible. Other things might not work, but for me, program has been this miracle where I've gotten to show up and I've gotten to be a person in recovery and help other people in recovery and just receive the love and the support and the intimacy that doesn't always feel possible outside the rooms. There's just such a vulnerability and honesty when you don't know someone's last name, you don't know what I do. All you know is here's this person going through something and you're just listening, you just care. And I love that, to receive that from others and from myself. And just to know I'm not the only one who's been down this path, and other people get to join us on it. And just to give love and to receive love. And it can just feel really hard sometimes, but I wanna do the work. I don't want to stop doing the work. And I want to be a 60-year-old, 80-year-old lady still in the rooms. Like, that is my goal, is to be a golden girl still in the rooms, willing to show up and still getting the support from this, because this is my medicine. So thank you all for being here and for showing up for your recovery.
Many thanks to Allison for sharing her story here on the podcast and the courage to talk about the miscarriage and what she had to say about it. I know from personal experience and from others in the program that many other couples have gone through that pain. For my wife and I, it took a long time to have a viable pregnancy. There were, I believe, 2 miscarriages. One was a documented miscarriage and the other one we think was. My wife suffers from PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so, we had a lot of difficulties, and it took us 7 years into our marriage before we finally had our son. So I understand all the emotions with that, and sharing it here on the podcast lets other people know that we too can get through things like that. Thank you, Allison, so much for talking about that. And like I had mentioned, hearing stories about sexual anorexia, a lot of them do come from COSAs. So eternally grateful for that as well. So hearing Allison's story, I've mentioned this on a previous episode of the podcast, episode 53 with my friend Brian L., who had also suffered from covert incest with his mother enmeshment issues. On that, I had referenced a book called Silently Seduced: When Parents Make Their Children Partners. And this is by Dr. Kenneth Adams, and I'll leave a link to that book in the show notes as well. I originally found this information on another podcast that I listened to called The Mental Illness Happy Hour, and that was on episode 588 with Dr. Kenneth Adams. And just for clarification, the book and podcast that I had mentioned were outside resources and not affiliated with either SAA or COSA, but I thought it had some pertinent information for anyone who is a survivor of covert incest. So in addition to that, I will also be leaving links to the COSA website, which is cosa-recovery.org, and information about the Adult Children of Sexual Addiction, or ACSA, meetings. The Adult Children of Sexual Addiction meeting is open to anyone affected by sexual compulsive behavior, including members of other 12-step programs. It's especially helpful for anyone who identifies as being affected by childhood caregivers or members of your own family of origin, or if you're not sure and exploring whether you may have been affected by compulsive sexual behavior in this way, you are very welcome. I will be leaving information for the website and the Zoom information for this meeting in the show notes. So with the Bay Area retreat coming up this weekend, I am going to keep this episode short. No new feedback to share or any music on this episode. And I had mentioned in episode 122 with Tim that during these storms here, my power was knocked out, as well as my internet, and I was going to be doing a recording with past guest from COSA, Stephanie H., and her husband John, and that will be the next episode. We ended up recording about a week after we were originally scheduled, once my power and internet were restored again. So look forward to that coming up. And I do have other conversations recorded that I will be sharing on upcoming episodes. With the retreat, I might be doing a post-retreat episode, and I also may be recording workshops at the retreat. And so I'm trying to figure out how all of these are going to schedule into the future episodes of the podcast. But at least the next episode will be featuring COSA speaker Stephanie H. and her husband John, and we had a lovely conversation, so look forward to that. With that, I'm going to wrap up this episode. If you wish to leave feedback for us, you can reach us at feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com, or if you wanted to get a hold of me personally, you can reach me at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and as always, keep coming back. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.